by President Roosevelt that no, and also Truman later, that no American soldiers should be buried in German soil because of the animosity between the two countries. At some point, Margrathe was picked as a cemetery for the Americans, and the result, that's what we see here. The cemetery was much bigger at first. The cemetery counts about 8,900 graves now. I believe it's a little bit more. But at some point there were 13,000 Americans buried here at the beginning in the late 1940s, and also 6,000 Germans. The Americans were buried here, and the Germans were buried in the field across the cemetery from here. They had a separate cemetery. And one thing that you should know about the cemetery is that the Dutch, after the war, they had very warm feelings for their liberators, and they still do. This area here was also liberated by Americans, which were the 30th Infantry Division, Old Hickory Division. They liberated the area here in and around Margrathe. And also for us, I come from Eindhoven, of course, which is more to the north, but the entire parallel where the 82nd, the 101st fought, but also 2nd Armored Division, 29th Infantry Division, the 1st Infantry Division, they all were in this part of the Netherlands in some point. And because we had so much warm feelings for our liberators, a lot of people from the area here started to adopt a grave and took care of the graves here, placed flowers at the bottoms of the
too long until he got hit, got killed. He took Colonel Wolverton's place. Now, just because he took his place doesn't mean that we felt the same way toward him as we did Wolverton. Wolverton was a pragmatic person. He was a real people person, easily approachable even to lower ranks. Could go up and ask permission to talk to him, and he would always talk to you. Horton was not that type of person at all. Had nothing particular against him, he just was not a people person. And he wasn't very popular. He talked to me just the same as I talked to you guys, and I talked to him the same way. He wasn't a PSC to a general, it was just a person to person. Yeah. He was a very warm person, very congenial, easy to get along with. I got to know his family through him. They even sent me their Christmas letter that they sent to the family. And when he died, why, his wife, Elizabeth, sent me a nice little note saying how much she appreciated it and signed it Libby. We were that familiar. So I miss him a lot. And I thought more of him than any other officer I knew. Taylor, I had a relationship with him. It was a little different, but we still talked as if we were one person to another. And he was suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease in his latter stages. Bernard was suffering from Parkinson's, and the last time he called, talked to my wife, he said, Donna, he said, getting old is awful. And he called me 3 days later and said the same thing. I didn't realize he was that close to death, and a couple weeks later he died. And I was really shocked. And I still miss him. I still miss those phone calls.
So about almost every division is here. Of course, also a lot of fighter pilots and bomber crews. Yeah.
I'd have to say that 99% of the officers in the unit were good officers. In fact, I don't think they came any better. And if you'll notice in all the statistics that officers were overrepresented as to privates. Officers, and the reason for that was in the Airborne, the officers were not in the back saying, go get them. They were up in the front saying, follow me. And that's one of the reasons we have so much respect for all of our officers, like this officer here. And that's another reason I was proud to be in the Airborne, because the officers were in the same split trenches with us. They ate the same as we did, no better. They suffered all the indignities that we did, the weather, the flooding, everything. So you would feel differently about officers than other units where the officers stay in the back. Parade ground jump. Beautiful Sunday afternoon. No firing around the range. We didn't hear any firing at all. Now the plowed ground was soft to land in, but it was awfully hard to run across to get out. It really wore us out if you're out in the middle of it. The assembly was quick. Every company assembled very quickly.
You remember what the first thing was that you saw when you were on the ground? What's the first thing you noticed?
The first thing I saw really was when we got to Son, really. That's the first thing I noticed. And there was a guy had a little store there someplace, and I went in and tried to buy some cheese, and he wouldn't take my money.
Did you have the invasion money?
That's right, we had invasion money. And he wouldn't take any money.
Dropped into Holland and tried to buy some cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love cheese.
I'll bet.
And I knew they had good cheese. And I went in there and he had a nice big round of this nice yellow cheese. And he sliced it off and I tried to give him the money. No. Reserve. We didn't carry a May West this time, of course, but we carried all of our other equipment. We had a jump rope, we had grenades, and food, K rations, nine boxes of K rations, and due to the fact that we had lost our mortar in Normandy because it was in an equipment bundle, and that bundle was never recovered, not for us anyway. I jumped with the two, and guys behind me had the ammunition. So that's why it was done that way. Now everybody thinks that's wonderful. It's not hard at all. There's a guy in Danahay, you know Danahay, in his group that jumped with a 81 millimeter tube in his arm. Wow. Now that takes some doing. A little guy like me couldn't do that. But actually that's not hard, anybody can do it. And you know as well as I do, I'm sure, many guys carried their machine guns going down rather than put them into bundles. And the reason for that also was most machine guns were lost.
Joe was in the 506, in G Company 506 in 42 and until late 43. And just before they went over to England, Joe had some problems with the sergeant in the outfit, and the sergeant didn't really like Joe. And at some point, Joe was transferred to H Company 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment. Just before they went out of the foxhole, Joe got hit in the shoulders by bullets, and later in the afternoon, he also got hit in the arms. He was pulled back off the line, and the medic that was active here in this vicinity, he put Joe's arms together, strapped to his body. One of the grenades ended up in a foxhole where Joe Mann was, with the arm strapped to his body, with 6 other wounded men of his outfit, and the grenade landed in between them. And Joe could only do one thing: or the grenade would explode and everyone would die, or, and that's what he did, made the ultimate sacrifice by throwing his body with his back on top of the grenade, shielding the grenade explosion from his buddies, thereby saving 6 of the other guys.
As you said, when we got to Camp Shanks just the night before we went out, he was informed that he was being transferred out the next morning. The sergeant involved was Sergeant Skeen, and for some reason, Joe was a rather taciturn person. He didn't show his feelings very much, but it was obvious that he was not impressed with the sergeant, and the sergeant returned that. And he did everything he could to provoke Joe into making some statement that they could use against him, and Joe never did that. He just silently repulsed the sergeant and just drove Skeen wild because he couldn't get him to respond. So I don't know how it happened, but the night before he was informed he was being transferred out, and he knew it was a rotten deal. And we sat up and talked most of the night, and as you said, the last thing he said, "I'm going to show you guys, you're going to hear from me, I'm going to be a good soldier." And that's exactly what
the 101st captured San, and the bridge was blown. This, together with the theater, just 100 yards more to the north, the Vestzaktheater. Vestzaktheater, that was the CP for the 101st, and this was divisional headquarters and the quarters for every headquarters personnel. So they were here. And Jim's got a story about that, because when on the 18th, when 3rd Battalion and 2nd Battalion attacked Eindhoven, Jim was lucky enough to be held in reserve here in San, because his platoon was the one that was kept in San to be security for division headquarters. And Jim can tell the story better than I can. So
there was a very attractive young lady standing up here, very sedate, and most of us were out here, and a couple of our guys were making some very lewd comments about her physical attributes, thinking that she couldn't hear, and she never turned a madder than I. And one of the officers came up here and started talking to her, and she looked over at these 2 guys and answered him in perfect English. They about you can imagine how they felt. There is another story though. We were around the back side, dug in for the night, and just before dark, an officer came out from headquarters and asked for a volunteer to dig a foxhole for General Taylor. And I said, "Hey, this is combat, tell him to dig his own damn hole." And he, of course, not knowing who we were, he ran around trying to find out who the hell said that. Nobody would say anything. So I have a feeling that that captain dug that hole himself. Because I know how it works. You know, Taylor told him, get a hole dug for me. So the natural thing he thinks is grab some punk out here and do it for me. And if you can't find somebody, you're going to do it. That's why those things happen. I became pretty well acquainted with General Taylor after the war up till he died, but I never told him that story.
Because they had to get the entire battalion across the canal to attack Eindhoven. But of course, if you have a bridge, it's not very hard to cross a battalion. But now there wasn't a bridge, and there was only few means that the engineers had available to make a bridge. Well, what they did is eventually make a small plank bridge. I think Jim will tell you. So much time that only 2nd Battalion was able to cross on the 17th, and it took them all the way into late in the evening, and maybe even some during the night. But of course, they didn't have much lighting going on. So 3rd Battalion stayed on the other side of the canal until the engineers were able to make a little. Yeah. Oh, they're going to draw it. Doug, your wish.
What?
Yeah.
Are they
Your
really?
wish is Sean's command.